Yeah.
Last week we talked about what the Caps needed out of that West Coast swing to stay in the playoff hunt. We said a minimum 4 out of 6 points. They got 5 out of 6.
I think I said 3, but
Okay, you said 3. What did those results change your opinion about their likelihood to make the playoffs?
yeah, I mean, you'd be crazy if they didn't change your opinion just because of the points. I mean, if they had come back with 0 points from that trip,
Right.
basically the season would be over at this point. The way it is now, what they've done combined with Toronto absolutely collapsing over the last 2 weeks. Yeah, I mean, they're in the mix for sure. It's a realistic sweat right now you've got going on. You know, they still, I think, would be decent underdogs based on the fact that so many teams that around them have games in hand, and they still have a really difficult schedule. You know, they did well with a difficult schedule in California, so you know, they're playing some of those same teams. They're playing the Kings tonight. They've still got Boston. They still have a really tough schedule, but you know, I mean, I would say if you look at those games really carefully, they sort of got outplayed 5-on-5. But you know, they won the games, they got the points, and that's what really matters at this point.
It is, and you mentioned it. They actually have a game in hand on Toronto, so they actually have the advantage over Toronto while they're behind Detroit in that regard. Matt, would you agree? You think this team's peaking at the right time?
Well, it certainly seems like it. I mean, that was a trip that you thought would. I mean, I think a lot of observers probably thought this is the end of the road for them, and when they come back, they're not going to have any hopes. But that now it seems like they're, like Dan said, right in the mix. Now, this game with the Kings tonight, it's almost like when you play one of those gambling golf games. You got to validate your birdie on the next hole by making it a par or better. And if they lose tonight, because Detroit and Columbus play each other tonight, and those are teams that have games in hand against them and that are right around them in the mix. And what they need to do is root for no overtime in the Detroit-Columbus games. They want one of those teams not to get any points out of tonight.
The Kings were the one team that they lost to in California, Mike. It was an overtime loss. So they got a point out of it. So do you agree that they sort of... shootout loss.
Yeah, it was a war, and they played very well in that game.
They need to validate it, though.
Well, I agree with that, but even bigger picture, I'm wondering if Ted Leonsis is sitting back going, what am I going to do now? I thought I made up my mind about things. Now I have all this to consider at the end. If they get in, is that enough to save George McPhee's job? I don't know. I mean, do you take the whole picture of a team that you thought had Stanley Cup aspirations in the beginning, or do you look at this end run again as what they always do? And look, all hats off to them. If they actually make this and they finally get in the playoffs, great. I don't think it should obscure the big picture of where this team is going and whether they can win a cup with this roster.
I guess when you talk about them peaking, I don't know that I'm convinced that they're peaking. I mean, they're getting the results, and you can't argue with the results, and that's great for their playoff chances. But are they playing substantially better hockey? I mean, the goaltending from Halak has been nice. He wasn't on the team a month ago, and he's obviously the number one guy at this point. He's already going to start against the Kings, but they don't seem to be tilting the ice in their favor the way the NHL's best teams do.
But they're winning those grinding playoff-style games.
Great point. I think
shootouts that don't happen in the playoffs.
They've killed off 19 power plays in a row. Their penalty killing has been great. The one thing that everybody was worried about this team was the perimeter in front of the goalie, and I think that you're right, they're not great offensively. They're not a bang-up team in any way, but they're grittier than they are prettier right now, and I think that means something.
More gritty than pretty. Would you agree with that, Matt?
I'm not totally convinced of that. I think they have. I think the Halak move, which a lot of people doubted at the time, and maybe long term doesn't make a ton of sense. But if you wanted to try to get, you can't deny it's given them a lift goaltending wise, which they needed, particularly on this West Coast swing, because they're not a lot better on the blue line. They couldn't make, whether it was the price was too high or there just wasn't anybody available. They didn't get better on defense, and they struggle on defense. Let's face it.
Another point, and Dan, you mentioned the 5-on-5 struggles from him. Grabovski's back skating on the ice with him. He could be back for the Boston game this Saturday. That should help.
Which is big. I mean, he's obviously one of their best offensive weapons, and they have been doing this without him. I mean, some of the line combinations continue to baffle. Ovechkin continues to skate the big eagle, who's just not what you think of to match
9 out of 10 points. It's working.
It's a quick point. Rennie dropping the hockey knowledge on us.
He's a Michigan guy. It's hockey town, right?
I still, if I had to guess, I still would say they don't make the playoffs.
All right, way to bring it down. This was mostly encouraging and uplifting, Dan. You have to bring it down.
What do you think they will?
I think they will. I've always said I thought that they would because this is what they always do.
You thought Maryland was going to get into the tournament, too.
All right, Johnny Sunshine over here, the return of Johnny Sunshine. All right.